Jesus went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place because Jesus often met there with his disciples.
So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers, together with police, from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, came forward and asked them, "Whom are you looking for?"
They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus replied, "I am he." And Judas, who had betrayed him, was standing with them. And when Jesus said to them, "I am he," they stepped back and fell to the ground.
Again he asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" And they say, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you are looking for me, let these men go."
This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. "I did not lose a single one of those whom you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's slave, and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus.
Jesus tell Peter, "Put back your sword. My father say I supposed to suffer all this kind of stuff, this and that. What I going to do? Just like him give me a cup full of that bitter kind of stuff to drink, I go and drink the whole thing." Then the captain, the army guys, and the police guys, and the Jewish leaders, them take Jesus and tie him up.
Y lo llevaron primeramente ante Anás, porque era suegro de Caifás, que era sumo sacerdote aquel año. Caifás fue quien explicó a los judíos que convenía que un solo hombre muriera por el pueblo.
And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest, and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door without. Then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and brought Peter in.
The woman said to Peter, "Are you not also one of this man's disciples?" He said, "I am not."
Now the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it warming themselves. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself.
The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered him, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all Jews come together. I have said nothing secretly."
"Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I had said to them. They know what I said." When he had said this, one of the police standing nearby struck Jesus on the face, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?"
Jezus zei, "Als ik iets verkeerd gezegd heb, zeg dan wat er verkeerd was. Maar als het juist is wat ik heb gezegd, waarom slaat u me dan?" Daarna stuurde Annas hem geboeid naar Caiaphas, de hogepriester.
Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. They asked him, "You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?"
Again Peter denied it, and at that moment the cock crowed. Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover.
So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you."
Pilate said to them, "Take him yourself and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This was to be fulfilled what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die.
Pilate entered the praetorium again and called to Jesus, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, saying, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?"
比拉多说：“我岂是犹太人呢？你本国的人和祭司长把你交给了我，你犯了什么罪呢？”耶稣回答说：“我的国不属这个世界，我的国若属这个世界，我的臣民必征战，使我不至于交在犹太人的手里。只是我的国不属这个世界。”
Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?"
And with that, Pilate went outside to the people and said to them, "I find no guilt in him."
But you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews? They shouted in reply, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a bandit.
Nang nagkagayon nga'y, tinangnan ni Pilato si Jesus at siya'y hinampas. At ang mga kawal ay nangagkama-kama ng isang putong na tinik at ipinutong sa kanyang ulo. At siya'y isinuotan ng isang balabal na kulay ube.
Og kaniya, miduol sila nga nanag-ingon. Mabuhi ang hari sa mga Hudiyo. Ug unya ilang gipanagsagpa sila. Og si Pilato, migula na usab, ug miingon kanila, "Tan-awa, ania gidala ko siya kaninyo. Sa gawas, aron mahibalo kamo, nga wala ako'y nakitang ikasumbong batok kaniya."
When Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and a purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." And as soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" But Pilate answered them, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him."
The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he has claimed to be the Son of God." Now when Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever.
He went back into the palace and said to Jesus, "Where did you come from?" Jesus gave no answer. Pilate said, "Don't you know that I have the power to release you or to crucify you?"
Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all, unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." From then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar."
When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at the place known as the Stone Pavement. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon.
They cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate asked them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but the emperor." Then he handed him over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and, carrying the cross by himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on either side, with Jesus between them.
Pilate also had an inscription written and put on the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek.
The chief priests of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews," but that this man claimed to be the King of the Jews. Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, dividing them into 4 shares, one for each of them, with the undergarment remaining.
The garment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. "Let's not tear it," they said. "Let's decide by lot who will get it." This happened that the scripture might be fulfilled that said, "They divided my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment." So this is what the soldiers did.
Stabant autem juxta crucem Jesu, mater eius et sora matris eius, Maria Cleope et Maria Magdalene. Cum videsset ergo Jesus, matrem et discipulum stantem, quam diligebat, dicet matri, mulier, ecce filius tuus.
And he said to his disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home.
A jar full of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit.
Now it was the day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath. Because the Jewish leaders did not want the bodies left on the crosses during the Sabbath, they asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies taken down. The soldiers therefore came and broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus, and then those of the other.
Doch als sie zu Jesus kamen, stellten sie fest, dass bereits tot war. Deshalb brachen sie ihm nicht die Beine. Aber einer der Soldaten stieß ihm eine Lanze in die Seite. Sofort flossen Blut und Wasser aus der Wunde.
This has testified so that you also may believe his testimony is true, and he knows that he tells the truth. These things occurred so that the scripture might be fulfilled, none of his bones shall be broken.
And again, another passage of Scripture says, "They will look on the one whom they have pierced." After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, though a secret one because of his fear of the Jews, asked Pilate to let him take away the body of Jesus. And Pilate gave him permission, so he came and removed his body.
又有尼哥底母，就是先前夜里去见耶稣的，带着煤药和沉香，约有100斤钱来。他们就照犹太人殡葬的规矩，把耶稣的身体用细麻布加上香料裹好了。
Now in the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a tomb where no one had ever been laid. So because of the Jewish day of preparation, and because the tomb was close by, they laid Jesus there.
The Gospel of the Lord.